What happens when 30 years of your life is based on a lie, and the moment you discover the truth is broadcast live to millions? Stop the tape. Stop everything. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife. In his hand, a white envelope. On stage, a woman whose entire world was about to shatter. The audience froze. The cameras kept rolling. And what came next would become one of the most unforgettable moments in television history. But nobody, not the producers, not the audience, not even Dr. Phil himself, was prepared for what that envelope contained. 48 hours earlier, the Dr. Phil show had received a call that would change everything. Margaret Chen, a 52-year-old schoolteacher from Portland, had written to the show in desperation. For 30 years, she had raised a daughter she believed was hers. But recent family conflicts had led to accusations, whispers, and a devastating question that wouldn't leave her mind. What if everything I know is wrong? Her daughter, Rachel, now 30, had always felt like she didn't belong. Different hair texture, different eye color, different personality. Family members had made comments throughout the years, subtle, cruel suggestions that maybe Margaret wasn't Rachel's biological mother. The tension had reached a breaking point. I need to know the truth, Margaret's letter had read. Not just for me, but for my daughter. We're falling apart, and I don't know how to fix this without knowing for certain. The Dr. Phil team had arranged for comprehensive DNA testing. Standard procedure. They'd done it dozens of times before. Mother-daughter, clear results, move forward with therapy. Simple. What they didn't know was that this case would break every protocol they'd ever established. The day of the taping arrived. Margaret walked onto the stage with the careful steps of someone approaching an execution. She wore a blue cardigan, her daughter's favorite color, like armor. Rachel sat in the green room, refusing to come out until the results were revealed. Dr. Phil began the interview with his characteristic directness. Margaret, tell me what brought you here today. Her voice trembled. I love my daughter more than life itself. I've been her mother for 30 years. I changed her diapers, stayed up with her when she was sick, taught her to ride a bike, helped her through heartbreak. She paused, tears already forming. But she doesn't believe I'm her mother. And I need to prove to her that I am. The audience's sympathy was palpable. This was a mother defending her love, her identity, her entire existence. But Dr. Phil had already seen the results. And his expression betrayed nothing. Margaret, he said carefully, before we bring Rachel out here, I need to ask you something. What if the results aren't what you expect? What if they show something unexpected? Margaret's laugh was hollow. Dr. Phil, I gave birth to that girl. I remember every second of it. 22 hours of labor. I have the hospital bracelet in my purse right now. There's no unexpected here. Science will prove what I already know. The confidence in her voice was absolute. 30 years of motherhood had built an unshakable foundation of certainty. She had no idea that foundation was about to crumble. Dr. Phil signaled to bring Rachel onto the stage. The young woman who emerged looked nothing like her mother, tall where Margaret was petite, fair-skinned where Margaret had olive complexion, straight blonde hair where Margaret's was dark and curly. Rachel, Dr. Phil began, you've spent your whole life feeling like you don't fit. Tell us why you wanted these tests done. Rachel's voice was sharp with pain. I've been called adopted, switched at birth, the mailman's daughter my entire life. And my mom. She glanced at Margaret. She gets so defensive every time I bring it up. If she's really my mother, why won't she just prove it and end this? Margaret reached out, but Rachel pulled away. The distance between them on that couch was more than physical. It was a chasm of doubt, hurt, and years of unspoken suspicion. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil held up the envelope. White, official, sealed. The kind that changes lives. I have the results right here, he said. Before I open this, I want both of you to understand something. Whatever this says, it doesn't change 30 years of love, sacrifice, and family. Rachel, Margaret raised you. That's a fact that no test can erase. But Rachel's jaw was set. I need to know the truth. Dr. Phil opened the envelope slowly. His eyes scanned the page. And then something happened that had only occurred 3 times in his entire career. He stopped. Hold on, he said to the production team. Hold on. Stop the cameras. The studio fell into chaos. Producers rushed forward. The audience murmured in confusion. Margaret's face drained of color. What is it? She whispered. What does it say? Dr. Phil looked up, and for the first time in his career, the cameras caught something rare on his face, complete disbelief. We need to go to a break, he announced. Margaret, Rachel, I need you both to come backstage with me. Right now. The audience sat in stunned silence. Something was terribly wrong. Backstage, in Dr. Phil's private office, the 3 of them sat in a circle. The envelope lay on the desk between them like a bomb. Before I tell you what this says, Dr. Phil began, his voice gentler than it had ever been on camera. I need you both to know that we have counselors standing by. We have resources ready. And whatever happens in the next few minutes, you're not alone. Margaret's hands were shaking. Just tell me. Am I her mother or not? Dr. Phil took a breath. Margaret, you are not Rachel's biological mother. The sound that came from Margaret wasn't quite a scream, it was something deeper, more primal. The sound of a reality collapsing. Rachel sat frozen, vindicated but not triumphant. I knew it, she whispered. I knew something was wrong. But Dr. Phil wasn't finished. But that's not all, he continued. Rachel, Margaret is not your biological mother. But, he paused, and his next words would change everything. She's also not unrelated to you. Both women stared at him in confusion. According to these results, Dr. Phil explained carefully. Margaret, you are Rachel's biological aunt. Your DNA shares approximately 25% overlap, which is consistent with an aunt-niece relationship. The room spun. Margaret grabbed the edge of the desk. What does that mean? Rachel's voice was barely audible. Dr. Phil pulled out a second document. When we got these initial results, I had our team do additional research. Margaret, do you have a sister? Margaret nodded slowly. Caroline. She died in a car accident 31 years ago. She was pregnant at the time. The pieces began to fall into place with devastating clarity. The accident happened 3 weeks before her due date. Margaret continued, her voice mechanical with shock. They said the baby didn't survive. We had a closed casket funeral. We buried her with my sister. Dr. Phil leaned forward. Margaret, is there any possibility that the baby survived? And then Margaret remembered. The hospital, she whispered. After the accident, they took Caroline to St. Mary's Hospital. It's closed now, but back then. There was a scandal. Something about record-keeping, about babies being, oh my God. She looked at Rachel with new eyes, eyes that now saw her sister's features in the young woman's face. The blonde hair that ran in Caroline's family. The blue eyes that skipped generations. The height that came from Caroline's husband, a man Margaret had barely known before his wife's death. You're Caroline's daughter. Margaret breathed. You're my niece. The studio erupted when they returned to stage. Dr. Phil made the unprecedented decision to continue taping, but on new terms. The audience needed to understand what had happened, and more importantly, Margaret and Rachel needed the support of millions witnessing their story. What we've uncovered today. Dr. Phil addressed the camera directly, his voice carrying the weight of the revelation. Is not just a DNA test result. It's a mystery that's been hidden for 30 years. Somewhere, in the chaos of that hospital in 1994, a baby who should have been declared deceased was instead placed in the arms of her aunt. We don't know if it was intentional, if records were falsified, or if it was a miraculous mistake. What we do know is this. He turned to Margaret and Rachel, who now sat closer together, hands intertwined. Margaret, you didn't give birth to Rachel. But you saved her life. You raised your sister's child when the world thought she was gone. You are her mother in every way that matters." The audience rose to their feet. The applause was deafening. Rachel was crying now, but they were different tears. "So my mom, my real mom, she died?" Dr. Phil nodded gently. "Yes. But she left behind the greatest gift she could, she left behind you. And somehow, through circumstances we may never fully understand, you ended up exactly where you were supposed to be. With family." Margaret pulled Rachel into an embrace that 30 years of doubt had prevented. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth. I didn't even know there was a truth to tell." "You're still my mom," Rachel whispered back. "DNA doesn't change that." Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. In the weeks that followed, Dr. Phil's team launched a full investigation into St. Mary's Hospital's practices in the 1990s. What they uncovered was a systematic pattern of falsified records, covered-up medical errors, and yes, cases of babies being misidentified or misreported. Rachel's case became the key to reopening investigations that had been cold for decades. Other families came forward with similar stories. The hospital had closed in 2003, but the truth refused to stay buried. Dr. Phil arranged for Margaret and Rachel to meet with a geneticist who specialized in family reconstruction. They learned about Caroline, really learned about her. Her medical history, her personality traits that Rachel had inherited, her dreams for her unborn daughter. "Your mother loved you," the geneticist told Rachel, showing her Caroline's medical records where she'd written in the margins about baby names, nursery colors, hopes for the future. "She never got to meet you, but she loved you." 3 months later, Dr. Phil invited them back for a follow-up episode. The transformation was remarkable. Margaret and Rachel sat on the same couch, but this time there was no distance between them. They moved in sync, finished each other's sentences, laughed together. "How has your relationship changed?" Dr. Phil asked. Rachel spoke first. "I spent 30 years feeling like I didn't belong. Now I know why I felt different, because my story was different. But I also know that the woman sitting next to me chose me every single day, even when the world told her I wasn't hers. That's not less than being a biological mother. That's more." Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. "I used to worry that if the truth came out I'd lose her. But the truth set us both free. She's my daughter. She's my sister's daughter. She's both, and that makes our bond even stronger." Dr. Phil pulled out an object from his pocket, a small silver bracelet. "Rachel, this belonged to your mother, Caroline. Margaret kept it all these years. I think it's time you had it." The bracelet caught the studio lights as Rachel fastened it around her wrist. Engraved on the inside were 2 words. "Choose love. Your mother left you more than DNA," Dr. Phil said. "She left you a legacy of love that survived even death. And Margaret honored that legacy by loving you as her own." The episode became the most watched in Dr. Phil's history. But more importantly, it sparked a national conversation about hospital accountability, adoption ethics, and the true meaning of family. Dr. Phil's team established a hotline for families who suspected similar situations. Over 300 calls came in within the first week. Some led to reunions, others to closure, all to truth. For Dr. Phil, this case represented everything his career stood for. Years later, in an interview about the episode, Dr. Phil reflected, "People ask me why I stopped the show that day. Why I broke protocol. The truth is, some moments are bigger than television. Some truths demand more than entertainment. When I saw those results, I knew we weren't just revealing a DNA test, we were rewriting a family's entire history. That required respect, care, and humanity first. Entertainment second." The white envelope that started it all now sits in Dr. Phil's office, framed alongside a photo of Margaret and Rachel, arms around each other, smiling. A reminder that truth, no matter how painful, is always the path to healing. And the bracelet? Rachel wears it every day. "Choose love," it says. And that's exactly what this family did. They chose love over biology, truth over comfort, healing over hurt. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about finding answers. They're about finding each other. And in a studio in Hollywood, broadcast live to millions, that's exactly what happened. The show ended. The cameras stopped rolling. But the impact of that envelope, and the courage it took to open it, continues to resonate with families around the world who are searching for their own truth. Because at the end of the day, Dr. Phil taught us all a lesson that transcends DNA tests and television ratings. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who loves you even when the truth gets complicated. Margaret showed up. She stayed. She loved. And that made all the difference. The legacy of that white envelope extends far beyond one family. Today, Rachel works as an advocate for adoption transparency and hospital accountability. Margaret speaks at conferences about the power of chosen family. Together, they've helped dozens of families navigate similar DNA discoveries, proving that truth, while painful, always leads to deeper connection.